Hello everyone! In this video, I will present our article named Gaussian Cyclostationary Noise, Theory and Synthesis. This research was carried out in the University of Strasbourg in France. In this work, we deal with texture synthesis. Texture synthesis consists in generating textures with a set of parameters that control the process. The parameters of the synthesis can be, for instance, a spectrum, some patterns, a color map, or an exemplar texture. The idea is to control the appearance of the output through these parameters. For instance, we may want the statistics of an input exemplar to be preserved in the output. In this work, we want the output to have an unbounded size and to be computed on the fly and in real time to be able to texture large virtual worlds. We are specifically interested in procedural noises in this work, which are interesting because they can create original content, whereas other families of texture synthesis such as stylings tend to yield limited variety. They are mathematically well defined, meaning we can know in advance the statistical properties of the generated output, and these algorithms often run in real time. This figure shows an example of such algorithms where you can see an exemplar on top, its synthesis on the bottom, and a spectrum computed from the exemplar in the middle and used for the synthesis. The issue with these algorithms is that they are used in a stationary context, that is, where statistics are spatially invariant. The consequence of that is that textures having disorganized patterns here on the left of this figure are well reproduced. However, textures on the right, where patterns have irregular global organizations, are not well reproduced. Our solution is to create cyclostationary synthesis algorithms, which are able to synthesize those kind of patterns we refer to as cyclostationary or periodically correlated patterns, because each element of the pattern is different but have similar statistics, and elements such as bricks and tiles are periodically and regularly placed on the texture. Those kind of patterns are not unknown in the literature, and they were already synthesized before under the name of near-regular textures. In this paper of 2004, a set of base tiles are computed and then blended and quilted together to create output textures. We propose a new approach which does not require tiles to be quilted and also turns out to produce textures with more details. More detailed comparisons with this paper, as well as similar works, are provided in ours. For this work, we made three main contributions. First, we introduced the mathematical theory of cyclostationary processes to the domain of texture synthesis for the synthesis of periodically correlated patterns. Second, we extend the two main stationary algorithmic theories, namely random phase noise and spot noise, to the cyclostationary case. Finally, we use these models to adapt 5 algorithms: local random phase noise, phasor noise, Gabor noise, spot noise, and high performance noise. First, I will present you a summary of the cyclostationary theory useful to understand our work. Then, I will present our method in 2 parts, first with cyclostationary spectral noise, then with by-example cyclostationary synthesis, before providing a short discussion and concluding this presentation. We'll start with the cyclostationary theory. But to understand cyclostationary processes, we first have to take a look at stationary processes. A stationary process is able to create disorganized patterns such as these. For these processes, statistics are identical for every position and across different realizations. This doesn't mean that the texture is the same across different realizations, only that its statistical properties, such as their histograms, are identical. A cyclostationary process, on the other hand, is one whose statistics are periodic with respect to one or two period vectors t0 and t1 that you can see on the figure. In this example, statistics on blue positions are all identical. On pink positions, they are also identical. However, statistics on blue positions can be different from statistics on pink positions, as you can see, for example, with the histogram that varies according to which positions I'm looking at. Each set of positions denotes a stationary process named a polyphase component, for which the statistics follow the rules of stationary processes. With these theoretical elements provided, we can now see how to adapt stationary spectral noises. We are interested in three major spectral noises: local random phase noise, phasor noise, and Gabor noise. These algorithms compute an output in different ways, but have in common that a unique power spectrum that you can see on the left is used to instantiate the noise, and a random phase is attributed to the power spectrum to compute the output. This kind of processes can generate this kind of patterns. We adapt all these algorithms to the cyclostationary case by modifying the spectrum so that it varies spatially and periodically. This is the same as defining one power spectrum for each polyphase component. This enabled us to smoothly vary the statistics of the output without changing the random phase. For instance, we obtain these patterns by modifying a Basile spectrum such that it executes a rotation on itself. In the previous section, the power spectrum was used to control the appearance of the texture. An alternative way to control it is through a small exemplar. We now see how to adapt two by-example procedural noises to the cyclostationary context. Firstly, with spot noise. The spot noise is a Gaussian stationary process. The underlying model consists in subtracting the mean from an exemplar texture before convolving it with a white noise. In practice, we compute it by blending the texture at random positions in an output several times. If we try to use it with periodically correlated exemplars such as this one, it breaks its appearance, as you can see on the right, compared to the very left. To adapt this procedural noise to the cyclostationary context, we first have to understand the philosophy behind procedural noise by example. The idea is to estimate a process that could have generated the exemplar. As such, for us, all statistical tools have to be considered cyclostationary because the exemplar itself is considered to have been generated by a cyclostationary process. First, the mean is varying spatially and periodically, such that there is a different mean for each polyphase component, similarly to how there is a different histogram for each polyphase component. Second, we convolve the texture only on positions congruent to the period vectors to avoid breaking the pattern. The generated textures thus have the same global organization as the exemplar, but the elements of this pattern are varied, as you can see on the right compared to the very left. Note that there are different ways to compute the period vectors in the literature, and that in our article we showed a simple semi-automatic way of computing them from an exemplar texture. The results of this process are quite interesting. because we can see that some pros and cons of the original algorithm are kept. In the left of this figure, there is a texture generated as monocolor tiles for which each color is the result of a Gaussian random variable. Not only is the global organization of the exemplar kept in the output with our method, but new colors are obtained as if the texture was generated with the same random variable. This is because the cyclostationary spot noise is a cyclostationary Gaussian process. For exemplars that correspond well to this kind of textures, such as on the second column, those can generate plausible new colors as well. However, when statistics of the exemplar are not Gaussian, for instance in the third and fourth columns, blendings constrain the statistics of the output to be Gaussian, creating unwanted new colors. Finally, some details of highly detailed textures, such as the one on the two last columns, can be lost. Outside of quality considerations, we can create textures of unbounded size to compute the result on the fly, although it can be computationally expensive for some applications. We have also adapted the high-performance noise algorithm to the cyclostationary case. This is a different algorithm from the spot noise and has different properties. In its basic form, the principle is to blend hexagonal tiles taken randomly from the exemplar so as to create a regular hexagonal tiling. You can see an illustration of this process on the two first pictures. Each texel in the tiling is the weighted blending of exactly 3 hexagons. This idea is illustrated on the left of this figure, as I've already said. Its cyclostationary version consists in taking hexagons from positions congruent to the period vectors, enabling us to have the same global organization as the exemplar in the output, as you can see on the right of this figure. As with our cyclostationary spot noise, our technique inherits the pros and cons of the basic high-performance noise. Compared to our cyclostationary spot noise, this algorithm is significantly faster. It can still generate outputs of unbounded size, and it preserves more details, as can be seen on the last two columns. However, the high-performance noise algorithm does not respect the neighborhoods because of the hexagonal tiling, which creates visible cuts, as can be seen well on the first 4 columns. Moreover, repetitions can sometimes be spotted, such as the ones in the last 2 columns that I circled in red for you. We now discuss some important points about our work. The first point I want to discuss about is dealing with non-Gaussian exemplars. Spot noise and high-performance noise exploit blendings for the synthesis of an exemplar. These blendings can create Gaussian statistics, notably Gaussian first-order statistics, represented in a stationary context by the histograms. Basically, the first-order statistics are the histograms in most cases. However, a lot of textures don't have a Gaussian histogram. An existing technique is to use histogram matching algorithms to better preserve the appearance of the exemplar in the output. In a cyclostationary context, things are different. First-order statistics are a little bit more complex. Because they are equal to the first-order statistics of each polyphase component. Since polyphase components are stationary processes, our global matching consists in pre-computing a matching for each polyphase component. This eliminates problems caused by a classic histogram matching that we noticed when we tried it, which can generate artifacts such as the one circled in red, which are caused by colors matching with the color of the wrong regions of the exemplar. For example, with the buildings, you can see that some some lit interior of the buildings leak into the exterior. Oops. The next point I want to discuss is geometrical irregularities, which can sometimes occur in exemplars. For instance, how the railroad has planks spread semi-regularly across the road, or the squeaker texture has slightly misaligned wood. Our algorithms struggle with these irregularities. On the synthesized railroad on the left, some planks are cut or blended into each other. And on the synthesized wicker texture on the right, obvious blendings can be spotted. This problem is dealt with in irregular texture analysis and manipulation, as you can see on top of this figure, by computing a deformation field from the perturbated exemplar and turning the exemplar into a perfectly regularized version. After the synthesis of this perfectly regularized version of the exemplar, the inverse deformation field is synthesized too and used to perturbate the output. The challenge with our synthesis is to be able to synthesize plausible deformations on the fly on an unbounded surface, which we do not know yet how to handle. I can now conclude this presentation. In this work, we've adapted the cyclostationary process theory to the field of texture synthesis. Doing so, we've adapted 3 different spectrum-based procedural noises and 2 different example-based procedural noises with various properties, as well as their underlying theoretical model. However, our work has some limits along with the inability to handle deformations. Our algorithms are not adapted to the synthesis of regular geometric irregularities, whereas previous works could deal with them. Another limit is that the spot noise is rather expensive to compute, and a less expensive variant of it using a summarized version of the exemplar called text and noise in the literature is hard to implement because it is difficult to summarize our exemplars, though this would deserve more research. Additionally, by-example spectral synthesis is difficult for a similar reason. It is hard to extract the spatially and periodically varying spectrum from an exemplar, but this could be possible and again deserves to be looked into. This concludes my presentation. Thank you for watching it.